Hi, everyone. My name is Bonnie Garcia Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of National Fellowships here at FSU. And so we as well as our office, the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards, and we're joined here by...
Hello, everybody. I'm Keith McCall. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards.
So we've got assistant directors all around today. And so our offices work with students as they go through the fellowship application process. In particular, though, we're talking today about Fulbright, because obviously that's why you're all here. You're excited about this opportunity. And this is really our big program, I would say. So ONF, Office of National Fellowships, tends to work with undergraduates and recent alumni, and then OGFA, which is where Keith is upstairs, works with graduate students. So whatever part of the sphere you're coming from there, someone here is able to assist. The ETAs, I think, are the English Teaching Assistantship is a really interesting award because it's so flexible. And so that's part of why, especially students that are thinking about wanting to travel abroad, get quite a few students actually that are doing like the TESOL certificates here on campus. This is a nice way of putting those experiences or goals into action. So we're going to go through, is this now not going to work? That'll be hysterical if the pointer now doesn't work. There we go. Okay, so today we are going to talk about just a general overview of the program, go through the application checklist, talk about what makes a strong application for the ETAs. We do have a pretty rigorous internal process, and you can see that really starts like right now. I mean, this is an award that's not due until traditionally early October, and we're talking to you about it in January. So you can see this is a process that takes quite a while to go through, and we want to make sure that your application is as tip-top as it can be before you submit it. And that really starts like right about now, right? So knowing who we are, how to get in contact with us, and how we can help. And at the very end, we'll answer any questions. We'll also take a look at the website if you'd like. So the website is quite a beast. There's a lot of information there, and we can help you navigate how to look at maybe some of the different country awards, important things to take note of when you're on the different country pages, and what each of those countries are looking for. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this, but this is the history of the program. Huh?
And it's in Word document.
Hey, nice. But this is the history of the program, which was essentially started, let's just as a most base overview, to bring countries together, right? Foster mutual appreciation. And so that continues to be the mission statement of Fulbright. So, since 1945, this continues to be the mission of this program. And so in crafting your essays and looking at what you're trying to do in these different regions of the world, we want to make sure that mutual appreciation, that mutual understanding and connection is really coming through in what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. The program is sponsored by the Department of State, and it's for just about everyone. We tend to look at it as long as you are an FSU student or a recent alum who has not started yet at another institution, we can help you with your application, and we are more than happy to do so. We just want to make sure we're not stepping on anyone's toes. So that's our general caveat, but it's for everyone. So there's such a wide variety of awards. Obviously, we're talking about ETAs today, but if you'd like to view some of our other presentations on the academic awards or on the creative and arts awards, we did those the other day, and they're on our YouTube channel as well. Okay. All right, so as far as eligibility, applicants must be citizens or nationals of the United States at the time that they are applying. So that we mentioned things like that now because we have had situations where people were applying for their citizenship. We want to make sure all of that's taken care of before you actually submit your application fully. And you have to have a bachelor's degree before you start, before the start of the grant. And so most students, if we're talking to them about this and we want to skip that gap year between undergrad and starting your Fulbright, we're looking to talk to you like that summer between junior and senior year, right? Because this is such a long process. You'll go through this, you'll apply in October. We actually just found out who our semifinalists are for this past cycle. And so you're really applying almost a year and a half ahead of when you're going to find out whether or not you've made it. So if we're looking to minimize the time that you are out of school between and starting your Fulbright, we want to be talking to you between that junior and senior year. Some of them do have a language requirement. Actually, many of the countries do have some amount of language proficiency that is required. So it's really important to take note on the website, on each country's site, if that's the case. Obviously, we have connections here at FSU, but making sure that if you don't have maybe the course history that reflects you have a certain level of proficiency, that we're getting you connected with someone here at FSU who can do that evaluation, right? That's not always the case. Sometimes, I believe it's South Korea has like no language requirements. Does that sound right, Keith? Yeah. Some countries will just say, it doesn't matter, you don't have to have any sort of proficiency, you don't even have to be a novice of the language. We just want you to come in and all you're going to be doing is teaching English. Now, does it help if you know the language of the country you're going to? Of course, but it's not always required. So again, that's something that you just want to really take note of when you're looking at each of the country's pages. And the last one is that applicants must be in good health. And what this really means is that if you do need accommodations, if there are things that you need to be that Fulbright needs to be made aware of, that you're being truthful and disclosing that information as soon as possible. So I think the example that Jesse used was a couple of years ago, there was someone who like needed medication refrigerated, but they were going to a part of the world where that wasn't necessarily guaranteed that there would be refrigeration available. So we want to make sure that if accommodations are needed, if you do need that extra help, that you are able to get that before you get in country. So grant details. This award, it does cover all of those nice expenses. It's open in about 160 nations worldwide, and it really varies from anywhere from 8 to 13 months. So, I mean, you know, almost a full school year essentially of being in another country teaching English. In particular with ETAs, you're only applying to one particular country. And really what you're looking at is not just teaching English, but how are you bringing the American culture to the school that you're working with. These options for different educational settings are going to vary from country to country and sometimes from region to region. So one of the countries that we'll look at on their website today is Spain. So that's a very popular one for ETAs. Okay, you're looking at Spain. Okay. Yeah. So Spain actually has, if you take a look at the website, just straight on the page, it says like 170 some ETA positions. But then you get into it and you see that it's like each individual region has a certain number of ETAs that they're going to assign to it. And then even further in there, it'll say this particular region, you have to have some experience in like Model UN, right? Or this particular region, you're only going to be working with high school students. I have kids. I don't mind kids. Jesse does not necessarily want to work with tiny children. So if he's applying for an ETA, he should be looking to see, is this going to put me in an elementary school setting? If so, that's probably not the country for him, right? There is a way on the website that you can do a search for all the different ETA positions, and you can see like, okay, what is the age level I'm going to be working with? If you know where your preferences lie, that's where you want to start on that search. Okay. And I actually can't read it because of the captioning. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the last part is that some countries will also say they want you to do a supplemental project. And so this is in addition to teaching X number of hours a week, you are expected to work within the community that you're in. So again, this is talking about making those cross-cultural connections, right? So some countries don't have this. For instance, South Korea has it set up where I think it says you're in the classroom 22 hours a week, and then all the rest of your time should be spent like preparing to teach. So this is, it's very clear, like you are coming to South Korea to teach, and that is all they expect you to do. Do they want you to engage with your community? Absolutely, but it's not necessarily required. Now, there are some, like Spain, that will say, you're maybe only in the classroom for 16 hours a week. So we want you to do some sort of supplemental project. We actually had a really great panel from folks that were ETAs previously. And one was talking about how someone had written about doing like a community garden for the school that they were working with. And it sounded great. It brought together all of their interests, and they found out when they got there that the school already had a community garden, right? And so there was some leeway once they got there to change up their project, change what they were going to do. But what they're really looking for in that supplemental project is how are you going to bring your own interests to that country and still have that cultural, cross-cultural exchange. We saw quite a few this past year where like there was a student who writes blog posts here. And so she wanted to do like an oral history type of project in Spain. So her plan was to interview people that were there and bring that information and like translate it in both Spanish and English so that she could share it out further. So there's lots of ways that you can approach that. And we always suggest thinking about what are your interests? What are your interests outside of the classroom or outside of teaching that you would want to use for that project? Okay, this is just a few people that are ETA students from prior years here at FSU. I believe both of these students actually worked with Jesse. So I'm not going to have their full story, but they are very inspiring. And we talked about them in the first meeting too. Brian in particular was looking at ETA in Kenya, and he was able to leverage some of his time that he spent doing a project prior, both in high school and as an undergrad, teaching in underserved communities. And he was able to use that experience of like, how am I going to engage these students that I've already engaged over in another country? So really, as you start thinking about your essay and how you want to respond to that statement of grant purpose, how you plan to engage with those students, thinking about where you've had to do maybe informal teaching in the past or formal teaching. I mean, some people have been tutors and stuff like that, but thinking about when have you had to engage a group of people that maybe, you know, there was a disconnect there. How did that happen? And I think that's a really nice way of showcasing your skills and your resiliency and the way that you approach challenges when you're applying to something like an ETA. Same thing with Charlotte. Charlotte's interested, she's still with us. Charlotte is interested in Spanish and international affairs. Those were her majors. But in particular, she's interested in human rights. And so when she was applying for different places, she was looking at Canary Islands, which is very beneficial because if you know anything about Canary Islands, it's a very, the refugee population in the Canary Islands is quite large, right? So thinking about your interests, your majors, how you approach this application is obviously going to change dependent on what is happening in those countries, right? So I think last year we had someone else that was applying to Cyprus, which also right now has a very large refugee population. And they were talking about, you know, I'm doing like research on trauma and how that affects students. Yeah, and so thinking about what is happening in that region of the world, how does your skill set best shape to how you can approach those students and that population? Okay, let's go over some of the checklists for the application. So there is an online application portal. You can go ahead and make your login for that, but nothing is going to populate right now. It's just going to be a blank page. You can do it. I do recommend though that if you do that, remember the email address that you use, which sounds silly. I know you're so used to using your FSU email, but especially if you're applying and you're planning to do this after your graduation, right? And like sometimes 2 years after your graduation, you might want to use like a Gmail account or something that's not tied to your FSU account. That should open in April. That is what they've told us, that the cycle for 2024 and 2025 will open in April. For the ETAs, you have really these two essays. One is the statement of grant purpose. So how are you going to engage? What is going to be your pedagogical approach to teaching in the classroom? What parts of American culture do you plan to share? That's also where if a supplemental project is required, you're going to talk about that towards the end of that, that page. And then the second one is your personal statement. So what is it about your personal experience, your educational goals, your career goals that has led you to apply to something like ETA? But for the ETA award, what is it about that particular region that you're just like, I have to be there, I have to do this project, right? One of the things that Jesse always says is he's like Yoda, I'm just a taller version, so that's why I keep referencing him. if he can go through and do Control F and find every time you mention Spain, right, or Canary Islands, and swap that out for something else, like swap it out for Italy, swap it out for France, it's probably not detailed enough, right? So you want to make sure that yours is as relevant and compelling to that particular country as it can be, and that's largely where we come in. So when you meet with myself, Keith, Jesse, Christine, we have a whole bunch of people that are here to assist with that. We will largely be going over these two documents, that statement of grant purpose and the personal statement. Some countries, like I said, also require a language, so you do have that language evaluation that may pop up. Not all countries, but if you, I think you can technically submit one even if it doesn't ask for it. So if it says like, you know, oh, we want, you don't necessarily have to have it, but a novice level would be recommended. You can still submit something that says that you have a novice level or, you know, whatever your evaluation is. And it certainly doesn't hurt, right? The only time that it would be more of like a moment is we've had students that were like, well, it said that if I had like a novice level and like Russian, then I should note that. And then they uploaded an evaluation for Spanish. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Don't do that. That's just an extra piece of paper that no one needs. So just make sure that you're as clear and concise with those forms, that you get anything uploaded that helps in telling your story in that application. You do have 3 reference forms that are due for this. So that's something that I usually tell students, like, you know, before we even start on the statement of grant purpose and the personal statements, like start thinking now about who you could tap for those reference forms. Maybe you did a study abroad and you're really close with like the IP director that, you know, was part of that, organized that country. That might be someone to talk about, like your ability to adapt to a new environment. Maybe you are working for a nonprofit right now and you're like, wow, you know, they work with a very specific population. That might be someone that I can tap for that. This is not like a typical reference letter, right? So they're not going to have to write something on letterhead and submit that to Fulbright. What you do is actually in the application portal, you submit their names and email address, and it sends them a form that they then fill out. So you don't see it on your end. I believe you get an email that says it's been submitted. But this is one of those things that, you know, especially starting earlier, getting those contacts in earlier, letting them know that this is due, it just helps to alleviate some of your stress as you get closer to the deadline. You do need official transcripts from every institution attended, but I believe this is only if you're actually selected, right?
Yeah.
So for right now, you can download just your regular transcript. The main thing is making sure that it says FSU and your name on it. You'd be surprised, but don't just like take a screenshot of stuff and upload that. Like just download the unofficial transcript for right now. If you get selected, then we can get that official transcript in the system, right? And last but not least is your passport. Which, man, imagine doing all of this and not being prepared for this, okay? We have an international programs office that is fantastic. We have a passport office that works with them. You can speak with them about going through that process. I think the typical like government time says like 6 to 8 weeks for your passport. And just about everyone I know who's worked with the actual passport office on campus, they usually get it in within like a month to 6 weeks. So little faster turnaround, but part of that is because they're so good about making sure everyone's stuff is in when you submit, okay? I'm gonna grab a drink real fast. Does anyone have any questions before I?
There is one question, Bonnie, about somebody's working on getting their TEFL certification. They want to know if they have to go through FSU or if they can pursue that through any other accredited institution. I said I would pass it along to you, but my initial thought was Fulbright's not going to care as long as it's an accredited organization. I got it.
Bingo. Yeah, because we do work with alumni too, who are coming in and like, they may have done TESOL or TEFL classes, you know. We're just so happy that if people are going that extra mile, especially if they're applying for something like the ETA. But unless it was an actual degree program, that would be different. But yeah. Doesn't have to be through FSU, you can just get it done. Let's see, okay. All right, so what makes a strong application, right? like we've mentioned, and hopefully this has been clear, you have to have that commitment to the cross-cultural communication, that sort of exchange of ideas, a commitment to that Fulbright mission. We also, I'm not part of the commission. The commission wants to see that you have previous in-country experience. So like if you went on holiday to Spain, you know, for like 3 weeks or whatever, that's fine. What they don't want is occasionally you have people that are like, I currently live in this country and now I just want to stay here. So I'm applying for the Fulbright. Like that's not gonna fly. They want, it's about being equitable, right? Like how many people can we get them to have an experience where they're getting to explore other areas? Yeah.
It's very niche and specific, but my grandparents are from Spain and my parents previously held like some sort of citizenship.
Mhm.
Am I like ineligible to do it?
No, if you are a citizen or a national of the United States, and how, like, do you go back there frequently or like?
I mean, like vacation, not like super long.
That's probably fine. I think the general rule of thumb is like, if you're spending months of a year there, over the course of like 5 years, that's probably not the country to apply to.
Specifically for Spain, they don't want you having spent 3 months there in the year that you apply.
Okay.
So
So don't do any extended holidays in Spain for that year and you'll be fine. Yeah, that's another thing that's on the country websites. They'll have very specific guidelines for like how much time is too much time to have been in a country. Right, strong applications, like I said, language proficiency or a desire to learn that language or plans to learn. So like I have some students that, you know, last year, I think they were like, well, I'm finishing up, you know, Spanish 5 or something or whatever it was, you know, or like I'm working on this Spanish, it's like a translation course. And I just remember being like, well, that's way more than I ever ventured to know the language. But if you can reflect that in your essay too and talk about that you have this desire for like language acquisition, that also goes a long way in helping your application, right? That's showing that there's a commitment to learning more about that culture and that region of the world than simply going there to just teach. So it's just one of those things that can boost an application. Again, you want a project that is country specific. So if you're going to do this project or engage with that community, how is it specific to that region? If you're wanting to go in and say, I want to do this large farming project and it's on like an island community, we should probably think about that. What's the feasibility of that project? Is that something that is really able to be done and done effectively in the time that you're there? Which is our next point. Is your project and is your pedagogy feasible, right? The way that you're planning to engage with students. If you're like, I'm gonna have them translate all of these American authors and Spanish authors back and forth. It's like, okay, they're 4, you know, and you're dealing with elementary students. Is that really a project that's feasible or even a pedagogy, frankly, that's feasible for the group that you're working with? And that's also where your first discussions, when you come in and speak with an advisor, we're going to talk about like, well, what do you want to do? How do you plan to approach teaching? I think there was someone a few years ago who like had a strong theater background, and they're like, well, I want them to do some of these plays so that there's like movement in the classroom, but was also able to reference like, because it's shown that students that are like actual movement in the classroom, getting them to dance or sing or whatever, they're more likely to retain that. And it was like, yeah, if you can bring up very specific nuggets like that of like, this is how I want to engage students, let's do it, right? You do only have 1 page though, so we want to be as concise as possible. And that's something that as you work with us, we are really making sure that your essays have arc. So are they authentic? Do they sound like your voice, right? But are they also relevant and compelling to what that prompt is asking you? In the case of the ETAs, it says 1 page, but you have to keep in mind that the first 2 lines of that page is just statement of grant purpose, your name and country, or personal statement, your name and country. So you do not have like a full page to give your entire background of who you are and what has led you to this point. We really need to get at like, maybe a very specific moment that you realized you could teach, right? There was something that really sparked you to want to teach others. Or maybe it was like a struggle that you had to overcome and seeing how someone else approached helping you in that scenario, right? We want to make sure that what we're getting at is I love the movie Inside Out, like your core memory, like that core motivation for why you're doing stuff, why you're doing this application. We want to get at those nuggets as we start working on your essays. Okay, does anyone have any questions about generally
There's a couple questions
Oh,
in the chat.
yes, okay.
So we have a question asking, do you need to have a certificate or document that certifies your level in a foreign language, your proficiency level?
Yes, but when you go on to the Fulbright website, you will actually put in who can do your foreign language evaluation. And so what they will get is, it's similar to the your recommenders in that they will send the form to them that they can complete. So sometimes that will require that you sit down with that person who's doing the evaluation, who says like, you know, I had them read this, I had them write that, I translate this, and they sort of mark down what your score is for each of those. You can actually go onto the website, there's a section called application components, and I'll bring it up at the end too. That will show you the recommender form that ETA recommenders get. It'll show you the foreign language evaluation form that that person gets, but it's the same process. You put in their name and email and it gets sent to them directly. They fill it out. Actually, I think they have to click on the website, fill it out on the website, and then it gets submitted to your application.
We have another question.
Yeah.
How would the quote limited in-country experience impact military veterans who have deployed or lived in some of these countries?
So again, this is going to be country specific. So some of them, like with Spain, as Keith pointed out, it was like within the last year or the year that they're going, they can't have had more than 3 months, right? So it's really dependent on looking at the individual countries. What they say is like, how much is too much within a certain amount of time, period of time. So I think like I can't remember what country it was, but there's one that's like, if it's in the last 5 years and you've spent more than, you know, like 2 months worth of time, they are going to prioritize people that have had less experience than that. So, but you know, countries change so much in just a couple of years. So I think part of it is keeping that fluid, making sure that people have access. Oh, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the selection process. You can see there, we have these as if they're very finite, 7 stages. The first one is your project proposal. This is one of our first big deadlines for FSU. Everything is due around June 1st. And what that means is we want to see like the start of your personal statement, the start of your statement of grant purpose. We want to know that you have thought about who your recommenders are going to be. This is getting submitted through SurveyMonkey. So we have a website that you'll submit all of those things to. When you first put in that submission, if you haven't worked with our office yet, you're going to get sort of assigned a Fulbright advisor who is going to start working with you one-on-one and making sure that as you're going through the process from June until August, that you have someone that is working on your essays with you. Now, if you're here, more than likely, and you're going to apply, more than likely you'll start working with our office like by the end of this semester. And so this becomes more of a formality just to know that you have all of your stuff taken care of, that you're working on that process. Excuse me. One of the nice things with this is that when you enter your recommenders into our site, it sends them information on like, this is what a good recommendation form looks like. So we give them some information on how to approach writing that, especially people that are outside of academia, or maybe they're not familiar with the Fulbright program, this is just a way to give them a little more support before they start that process for you. So we want to make sure that everyone is hitting that June 1st deadline that's interested in applying, so that if you haven't already started working with an advisor, you have someone matched up with you who is with your interests and goals in mind too, okay? The second stage, and this is very, very important. It's very, very important, and yet it is scheduled right now for August 22nd, though that may be changing. This is the deadline though, so that everything of your application must be submitted to the Fulbright portal by this point. But wait, I thought it was due in October. It is, but for FSU, you have to have everything in by that August deadline because we schedule an on-campus interview for you. So a very, very key part of the application is the CCE form, which is the campus
Committee evaluation.
committee evaluation. There we go. It's just a test. You passed. We have this CCE form, right? That when done well, acts as like such a beautiful topper to the rest of your recommender forms. Okay. When done not so well, or when a student's not as prepared for that interview, it can be like, yep, the student wants to go to Spain, right? So we want to make sure that that form, your application, is as prepared and beautiful as it can be by that August deadline, so that you feel really prepared and capable before going into the campus interview in September. Are CCE forms required? No, they are not, but they are such a nice way to say that the university also recommends you to go on the Fulbright journey, right? So we want to make sure everything is in by that late August deadline. At that same time, you're going to schedule the campus interview. You'll meet with our faculty members that are all on the campus committee. It's usually like 3 or 4 in the room. They'll ask you some questions. Sometimes, I mean, in some cases, when that application is really well composed, it's going to be a nice chat about your plans and what you want to do in country. And sometimes, especially, I think it's more maybe on the academic awards, they can be grilling you about like, is this really a feasible project? How do you plan to undertake something like this? Do you have the pedagogical background to really approach teaching like this? So I think it's just best to be as prepared as possible going into August, so that the rest of the application process seems a little more breezy. They have not yet set the actual Fulbright date. We can assume that historically it will continue to be early October, and that's what we are sort of building backwards from that as far as our timeline. So you can assume that's a safe bet right now. Now, once that October deadline hits, everything is submitted. In fact, I think our due date is usually like a week before that, because I go in and personally attach every single CCE form that Florida State sees. So for my own sanity too, please make sure all your stuff is in on this date. After that October deadline, all of the applications go to the National Screening Committee. And so the National Committee meets they used to do it in person, and it was in DC, New York, and Houston, and it was like all coming together for the applications from around the country. And very different fields, very different areas of study for them, but they're meeting for like 2 months to go through all of the applications and deciding who will be semi-finalists and who will not be recommended. So like I mentioned earlier, we just found out who the semi-finalists are yesterday. So you can see that's like almost the entire fall semester waiting for those to get posted. So once this is done, it goes on to the actual host country. So the pool of applicants that were chosen as semifinalists get sent to the particular country commissions. We just found out that like Hungary just got their list, so they've told us it'll be a while for any applicants. But that takes another couple of months. And then this starts coming out on a rolling basis. So people's applications anywhere from, gosh, I think we started hearing the first of them last year, like in early March. But then the last of the last didn't find out until almost like, I think June, that they had been selected. And that that experience then starts either in August. I mean, sometimes they don't start until the spring, which hopefully those are the June folks. But it's a very, very long process. And again, that's why we're talking to you about this now, you know? If you're interested in this, that's great. We're so happy you're here. But we want you to start thinking about like, okay, who can I tap for those letters? Do I need to get a language evaluation? What types of experiences do I want them to really associate with like my personal statement, my pedagogy, as I write that application? These are things as you start brainstorming ideas. You know, it doesn't hurt to start thinking about those things now, so that you're a little more prepared. All right. Yes, and then obviously this is the final selection. I think I sort of lumped that all together. But basically, it's a very long process. We want you to be as prepared as possible. Come talk to us as soon as you can. Okay. All right. How can we help? Obviously, like I mentioned, we'll help you think about your projects, how you're actually writing, what types of things maybe are well suited for those documents that you need to draft. Maybe other things that we can bring up in like short answer areas, things like that. We'll help with your application management. So making sure all of those bits and pieces are submitted. Last year, I think I pretty much just lived on the Fulbright portal while all the stuff was getting submitted, because I'd have people go, wait, it says I got an email that it was submitted, but I don't know if it's actually on my account. I'm like, yes, it's here, you're good. So we are here to assist with that. We're also, if you need help as you're going through the starting process of like, I think I had a few people last year like, I just want to go. I don't really care where I go. And I was like, okay, well, let's start thinking about like, what languages do you have proficiency in? Okay, if it's none, then we need to look at which countries, you know, have an ETA where you don't need to have that language. And so we can help you as you're narrowing that down. And that's perfectly fine. If you're just like, I know I want to go to this region of the world because I just want to go, that's it. We can work with that. It's just a matter of you being in communication with us so we can start that process. We also do some essay workshopping. So occasionally when we get like into the summer, last summer we did a few rounds of like swapping advisors. We also did some where you swapped with other people that were applying to like different country ETAs, so you could see how they were approaching that same process. And so we want to make sure that you're getting as many eyes as you can on your application that can help with that. Different advisors have different styles. I mean, just like any two people. And so we want to make sure that we are able to assist you as much as possible with that. Obviously, with revisions, I mean, there were people that I started working with, I think last year, like in April, and we were meeting once a week until that deadline in August. So, I mean, it can be quite a process, right? First drafts are never good. I don't think I've ever read a first draft that like really knocked it out of the park completely. And that's fine, right? I mean, the whole point of it is to work through that, really craft what you're trying to get at and make sure it's as concise as possible. So we are more than happy to assist with that. And then obviously, if you do have specific questions, we know people at Fulbright, we know people that work for the commission that we can contact or get you in touch with the people to ask those very specific questions you might have. This is just our contact info. So the first three that you see up here are all with OGFA. So this is Keith's office up here. And then the four down here are all from ONF. I think our website has all that stuff too, just in case. But feel free to contact us. I mean, we're here to help. We want, I mean, the first year I was here, last year was my first Fulbright cycle, and getting to see people who came from such different backgrounds approaching these applications in such wildly different ways, you know, is such a thrill. So please contact us. We love hearing your stories and hearing about like your motivations for why you're doing certain things. So I'll leave this up in the background, but does anyone have any questions? And if not, I mean, if people are interested, I'm happy to pull up the website and show you some of the things on there. that work? Okay,
I'm very interested in applying. When should I get in contact with an advisor, or is there a sign-up form?
so we don't have a sign up form yet, but what we're going to do is, anyone that is interested and registered, once we get that SurveyMonkey site up and running, we will send that out to everyone that has signed up or registered for one of our events for Fulbright. You are more than welcome to contact an advisor now and say, hey, I'm interested in this. I just want to start, thinking about the process. What we'll probably do right now is like do, like a every 3 weeks meeting just to see like where you are in looking at ideas. Until we get to the end of the semester, we wouldn't really need to start on like that once a week or once every 2 weeks sort of deadline. But yeah, if you're already thinking about it and you're like, man, I really want to apply for this. This is something I want to do. Definitely start talking to us now. We can start looking at maybe countries or ways to approach those and just get those ideas rolling. I have students that had like those Google Doc, and it would just be like every week it was like, we talked about this and this is how I'm going to do this. And then like the next week was like, okay, this is my approach for this. So it's fun to look back on that. She was like, I kept all these notes. Like, that's incredible. But it's giving you an idea of sort of where you started from maybe just this idea of like, I think I want to teach English in Greece, and it's like, to then being able to articulate really well, like, well, the connection between Greece and Turkey is so important to that region, yeah, I would say start talking to us now. Sorry, that's a long way to say start talking to us now if you want to do that. We'll get you set on a schedule. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll pull up the website. So it's important when you start making your application, when you start going through the website and the portal, that you are going to the Fulbright US Student Program site. So it's us.fulbrightonline.org. There is a site that is for faculty members and like their interests. That's not going to do you a whole lot of good. Let's see. I should probably share my screen. That would be helpful. Okay, you see that now? Okay. So yeah, make sure that you're on the US Student Program site. If you go into applicants, there's a getting started page. Down here at the bottom is the starting the application. So you can, like I said, you can technically get in there and make an account. There's just not going to be anything there at the moment. So a few things that I want to highlight on this page. One is the application components section. So if you go in here, there's one that's specific to the ETAs. And in here, it'll go through each segment of that application. So thinking about like the statement of grant purpose, it gives you an idea of the types of questions they want you to answer, what they're looking for, and the specific requirements require like 1-inch margins, Times New Roman, 12 font, the first lines. They also have the same for the personal statement. So information about that. I will caution you that if you write in your statement of grant purpose and your personal statement exactly what it's asking for in here, what you're really going to be giving your reader is like a prose version of your resume. And that just is not enough. It's unfortunate, but that's given what it says, but that's not really how we should be approaching this, right? We want to tell your story in a way that's compelling, and compelling is not, and then I did this, and then I did this, and I worked for this, right? Maybe taking one aspect of that really resonates with what you're trying to do abroad and focusing in on that part of your story, okay? The other thing I'll point out is down here, there's a foreign language forms section. So you can read all about, obviously, like we said, it varies from country to country, but down here, there is an instructions for foreign language evaluators. So you can see this is essentially what they send your evaluator. And if you have someone that you're requesting to do your evaluation, I recommend sending this link to them ahead of time, so that they know how they should be going about that evaluation. Further down here, you can see it, there is actually a PDF. And when you click on that, open it here, you can see what it is your recommender will be asked, or I'm sorry, your evaluator will be asked. So it should not come as a surprise to you how they're going to approach that evaluation. And if you're curious about where you need to be, it's a good thing to have access to this. Of course, I can't see anything. Hang on. Tabs are at the top of the page, which is not visible. Okay. The other part I will point out is further down on that same application components page is the recommendation section. So if you go in here, again, it's giving you information about how to choose who would be a good recommender, you know, when you should start contacting people, all that jazz. Any sort of, there's some nuancy things in there about like if you need to have it unsubmitted and if you need to change it, things like that. But all of that information is in here, including another page that is instructions for ETA recommendation writers. So again, if you have someone that you're going to ask to be a writer, I recommend you read through this so you can see the instructions they're getting, but then you can also send them this link before you even put their name into the website, just so they have an idea. And here again is a PDF form that shows you what they will be sent. So you can see it's like there's like a lot of the usual stuff at the top. The second page is going into like, based on your observation of an experience with the applicant, comment on their ability to overcome challenges, comment on their qualities that are associated with teaching, you know. So if you have people that can speak to those aspects of your character, they should be the people that you are contacting for recommendations. Okay. The other thing I will point out is going to the different country pages. So we'll use Spain since we're here. There we go. So Spain, you can see that Spain breaks it down into ETAs and then they have all these other awards. So luckily, we're not talking about those today. If you want to hear about those, just did a great job on Tuesday and Wednesday, and you can watch those videos. But you can see right here, there's 170 placements for ETAs in Spain. However, when you get into the actual country page, as you scroll down, you can see that they break these down by different regions. So sometimes I'll get someone that's like, oh, well, I want to go to Madrid, because I've always wanted to go to Madrid. But if you then go down further, you can see that for Madrid, they're looking for very specific skills, right? You have to be, where is it? There we go, placement types. Right? Madrid, well, you'll be teaching at secondary schools up to 16 hours per week, plus 2 hours for planning. Additionally, global classrooms, which is Model UN preparation, requires attendance. Preparation is also required. So typically, people that are applying for Madrid, if you do not have experience with Model UN, either at the high school level as like being one of the captains of your team in high school or here in college, this is probably not a great fit for you, right? So they are really looking for people that are meeting very specific subjects and grade levels within Spain. So really important, and to just make sure that you're reading the country page. I mean, I think Spain is just such a well-established program. They have very clear ideas of who they want in classroom for particular areas. Every page though will give you the accepted degree level, they'll give you the grant period. So in the case of Spain, you're starting in September, right? And then it's lasting for 9 months. It gives you a breakdown of the different of the award profile. It'll give you if there's some sort of orientation. So there's a mandatory orientation, but it starts the second week of September once you're in country, right? You also have the candidate profiles, any eligibility requirements. So again, this is where you'll find, like, if you're a dual citizen, you're not eligible. If you have been in the country for X number of months within this year, you're not eligible. It'll have special instructions in here. So in Spain, right, they say, and I love that they bury this in here, but they say, the first sentence of your statement of grant purpose has to specify, I want to be in this region with this age level, you know, maybe working with this type of project. Like, all of that has to be within the first sentence. So it's a crummy first sentence, but everyone's going to have a crummy first sentence, right? Who's applying to Spain. It's just a matter of making sure those preferences are stated at the top. Again, and this is the case not just for Spain. In this case, they say to give your preference, they'll give consideration to that. It's not a guarantee. They're going to place you where they need you, right? Based on your application. Some countries on the country page will say, do not give a preference. We're not interested in where you would prefer to be. All we need to know is you want to be in this country. Foreign language proficiency is also listed there. So you can see for Spain, you do have to have this intermediate level. So you're going to want someone that can speak to that in your evaluation. Placement types are also there. So it'll give you an idea of the breakdown of the different areas and what you can expect for each of those areas. And then
I'm pretty interested in Canary Islands.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Hopefully we have someone you can talk to about that. We'll hope to find that out soon. Where is it? I'm making sure that was the last of it. Spain is I would say Spain's sort of almost the outlier, just because there's so many different parts of it, and they just keep adding to it. I think this American Spaces placement is relatively new, like within the last few years or something. So it'll also give you an idea of placement locations. So this says capital city, regional city, and rural. A lot of the ones for the Fulbright, though, especially in other countries, tend to be more in regional cities or rural. They're looking less at the capital. It's like really looking outside of those areas where there's less access to learning English, is where they want you. And it'll also give you a supplemental projects idea. So in this case for Spain, a supplemental project is required, right? There's no way out of that. So part of your application, part of your statement of grant purpose is going to be spent doing a project that's outside the classroom. So like, I've had some students that are like, I just want to teach, that's all I want to do. Then we need to look at places that are going to require you to be doing a supplemental project, right? But all of this information is all on each of the individual country pages. So I recommend going and taking a look at the different pages because they can vary wildly. So for instance, I'll pull up, let's pull up South Korea, right? You can see with South Korea, they actually break their ETA award down now into elementary school and secondary school. So pick your poison of who you want to work with. Again, all that same information at the top, except now we have a January start date and it's for 11 months. So again, varies from region to region. You can see they make a point of saying now, first and foremost, ETA should understand that the nature of the ETA grant is a full-time teaching job, right? Your duty, first and foremost, is to their school. They want you to engage with the community. They want you to, get excited about coming and being there. But primarily, you will be teaching 22 hours a week, outside time to be spent preparing. So just as a heads up, in case you're wondering about that, you want to make sure that's you're very clear on your responsibilities in the classroom for each of these ETA positions. Again, another thing to look for, orientation. For this, for Korea, they're actually looking at, you have to complete 120 TESOL, 120 hour TESOL course as part of receiving this, but it's being paid for through the commission. So some students, if they're not planning to maybe necessarily teach English full time, but they're looking at Korea, we have had students that have had that TESOL experience paid for by, the Korean Fulbright Commission as part of this program. So things to keep in mind. Again, eligibility requirements, it goes through very specific residency and candidacy requirements. Foreign language. It's recommended that it's novice, but no language is actually required. However, as part of your ETA orientation for South Korea, you will receive approximately 100 hours of intensive Korean language training. So, I mean, when I say every country is different, every Fulbright Commission is different, I mean every single one is different, right? In this case, again, it's elementary school, but it's only grades 3 through 6. So it's really, really important that if you are looking at a particular place, you are focusing in on every aspect of that site. I usually have students, actually, I think last year, the students I worked with, they just like bookmarked the country page. And every time they came in to talk to me, we would have this open and like, okay, are we making sure we're like staying within the bounds of what they say? So we want to make sure we're covering all our bases. And that's definitely true here. You see supplemental project not permitted. So you want to make sure that you are following the rules all around. The last thing that I'll show you is the search. So if you're just getting started, if you're not sure what you want to do quite yet, if you go to awards search under applicants, you can see, that out of here. You can actually search by, English teaching assistantship for the Fulbright award type. You can go, okay, but I need something that it's like maybe not required to have the language. And I need it to be for bachelor's degrees or whatever your level is. You can also pick placement type. So like, I want to work in an elementary school. Okay, so here are all of the awards then that are for people with just bachelor's degrees that are in elementary schools that don't require a foreign language for the ETA. And it'll tell you too at the top, how many for that region, how many awards there are, and then you can click into that specific country category or that country page. So if you're just sort of still thinking about it, if you're like, I know I want to do it, but I really don't know where I want to be, this is a nice way to just play around with your options as you do that search. Okay, that is a lot of information. I jokingly told Keith I would not go to the full time, and yet I have. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So sort of like what experiences should I be pursuing now to have a competitive application by the time I apply in like April?
Yeah, I think if you have experiences with tutoring or teaching on campus, those can be really beneficial. We've also seen students that have worked with like it's the nonprofit, the International Refugee. So
IRC.
yes.
I work there.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, that would be something that, especially as you speak to what's happening in a particular country and the population you're hoping to work with, it's like, I have this experience already helping people in a very tough situation, like how do you transition into that? That would be something that you could absolutely talk, oh my God, yeah, yes, come talk to us soon. That would be something that you could totally talk about in your application that makes you that much more competitive because you've had that experience. I know that like TESOL is a very expensive endeavor, right? And so I would never want someone to overexert their finances to prepare for an award that they're not going to know about for another year and a half. But it could be worth stating, and we've had some students like, should I be selected, I am, willing to do this in prep. And that's fine. I think that that's fine, but I definitely don't encourage people to start like doing that now, especially if you don't have plans to use those resources or that certification later, because it is a lot. But I think right now, thinking about volunteering in places that sort of in some ways mimic or parallel what you might see in country of that population, anytime that you can have experience teaching or volunteering with schools. We had someone that was she spoke Spanish, and so she started working with like a middle school here in town that had a high like Spanish population, but they didn't have a lot of people that could help translate for those students. So like times when you can, put yourself in a place to really help the most in those cases, are great. And it also gives you perhaps an insight into how you might approach teaching a group of individuals like that. And do you have any other?
If you're on campus, a low stakes, easy thing you could do to start having those sorts of experiences would be to go to the international coffee hours at the Center for Global Engagement. I think they're every
Friday.
Friday at 5
Yeah.
or something, yeah. And that way you can just show, that you have alignment with the broader mission of Fulbright of increasing that mutual understanding, getting to know people, being a sort of citizen ambassador.
I think there's a certificate program you can do through them, isn't there?
I know there is for.
I know there
staff.
is for staff,
Yeah.
but I think there might be one for students too. You'd have to check that out, but yeah, I mean, anytime that you can be engaging with other cultural communities and being at FSU is so nice because there's so many opportunities to do that, you know. I think that just shows that there's that commitment beyond the award to doing that in your everyday life. Anything else from the chat?
No questions in the chat at the moment.
Okay. Anything else here? Are you?
I think.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to me talk about this. I love this award. I think it's probably the most flexible of the Fulbright opportunities. And it's, like I said, it's really interesting to see how people approach this award. So if you're interested, please talk to us now. We'd love to get started on this with you and just see where that goes. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.